So human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. Under human trafficking, you're going to have organ trafficking, sex trafficking, and then labor trafficking.
When you said organ trafficking?
Organ trafficking, yeah, you can look it up. They will actually sell organs. We're dealing with a massive fentanyl epidemic, and some of these parents will just sell their kids for drugs.
It's almost like parents and people that sex traffic other human beings, they're just pimps.
Michael, they showed me pictures of trees where people will be smuggled across the border, and as part of the smuggling, they're taken to these trees, and these trees have handcuffs, and they handcuff them or abuse them.
I walk in redemption.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, extremely blessed on this end, and as always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God from that. Well, as you can see, I'm not in my studio. I'm actually in a hotel room in Dubrovnik, Croatia. And I've been here for a couple of days now. Went to Romania before that, was with the Tate brothers, spent a nice 2 days with them. I'll get into that a little bit more in another video. But it's been a great week. From here, I go on to Rome and Tuscany. My daughter's actually getting married in Tuscany on the 28th, so we're going to have a good time there. And it's just been wonderful. So many beautiful places around the world that I've been very blessed to visit. Eastern Europe is beautiful, obviously, all of Europe. Just great cities, wonderful. The food, the people, the environment, just beautiful, and I feel very blessed to have been able to visit these cities with my wife and daughter and family. And as you can see, I have this beautiful picture behind me that was given to me as a present, so we put it up as a little bit of a backdrop by a dear friend of mine who I spent some time in Monaco with, Tarek Toma, just a great guy from Germany, has a big company there. So a lot of good stuff going on. And a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with somebody that I would consider a friend right now. His name is Caleb Altmeyer, and he has an organization called helpingcaptives.org. And it's all about him helping people that were victims of sex trafficking, human trafficking. I got to tell you, there's some crimes, behavior that are just so deplorable. Sex trafficking being one of them, taking advantage of victims like that. And let me make something clear. I'm not talking about the nonsense that the Tates were indicted or charged with, because I've been through that case. I see what's happening there. It's nonsense. I believe, if there is justice, it'll be thrown out of court. There were no victims there in that case. I've been through it all with them. I don't support somebody that I think is involved in some deplorable acts. And we'll get to that at another time. But I'm talking about real sex trafficking, human trafficking of minors and women and people that they take advantage of. It's just deplorable. People like that in prison, they don't do well. Trust me on that, But I had the opportunity to meet with him, discuss some things with him, and then we sat down for an interview a few weeks ago in my studio prior to me coming on vacation. I don't want to get into all of that. He's going to explain it to you. I really applaud and commend him for what he and his organization are doing because, like I said, it's a deplorable crime. So one of the sad things is that it's happening, in droves over our southern border. California is the leading state, and obviously there's a lot of migrants coming over the border there illegally. They're coming into this country. Many of them are being human trafficked, sex trafficked. It's terrible. Our government knows that's going on, but they allow it. You got to be honest. You got to call it like it is, people. They allow it. They're allowing it to happen. I've spoken to Border Patrol agents, people that are in the know on this. It's terrible what's going on, and they're allowing it to happen. But again, that's another issue. But I think I had a very interesting conversation with Caleb. Hopefully, after you hear from him, you'll even support his organization, what he's doing. He's on the front lines, very, very significant, and he's very dedicated, as is his whole staff, with helping these people. But I want to just start this off by reading some statistics that might alarm you a little bit. Hopefully they will. But some things that I didn't know and I learned from him. What are the 3 stages of human trafficking? In the first stage, the victims are recruited. So they find these victims, they recruit them. The second, they're transported. Normally, like I say, they come in over the border, wherever they come from, and you're going to be surprised who is the people that promote human trafficking. It's amazing. And the third, they're exploited. Obviously, they're exploited. At the recruitment stage, criminals use many methods to force or trick people into being trafficked. In some cases, the people are abducted and assaulted. That happens. Now, listen to this. Who are the traffickers? And Caleb is going to go into this. I was stunned to hear this. They may be family members that are sponsoring or giving their people up to human trafficking, usually young girls or young boys. It's terrible to hear that people in a family, what kind of family is this? You know, people, I've said this time and time again, the major source of all the issues we're having in this country, in the United States, and maybe throughout the world, is the breakdown of the nuclear family. That's it. You know, all of this stuff, family isn't important anymore. You know, a husband and wife raising children, not important anymore. Fathers, not important anymore. Look at the result. It's all around us and it's not good. Breakdown of the family. This is the problem. They may be romantic partners and they may be acquaintances or strangers. So it can come from anywhere. How do traffickers choose their victims? Traffickers actively seek out individuals with certain triggers. Listen to this, such as addiction tendencies, obviously. If you're an addict, you're going to fall victim. Lack of family support. There we go again. Breakdown of the family, the nuclear family, and disassociation from a community. In other words, they can see people that are not involved in their community, areas where there's a lot of strip clubs and stuff like that going on. Terrible. Over 50% of identified girl victims are aged between 15 and 17, whereas about 40% of trafficked boys are under 12 years of age. And these are some of the risk factors. Significant risk factors include recent migration or relocation. Again, southern border, our president and all these Democrats in control, again, calling it like it is, allowing this to happen over the southern border and over the northern border. They know what's going on. They're not stupid. Mayorkas knows this. The Border Patrol agents tell them that, and they allow it to happen. Children, women being victim, they're all migrants, and this is what happens, okay, when you have no rules and no barriers on your borders. Mental health concerns, of course, substance use, of course, involvement with the children welfare system. You know, another thing, I don't know how, you know, people in the welfare system that are sponsoring or giving these young people up to human trafficking. It's terrible. It's a real problem. It's getting worse because we have all these migrants coming over the border. But I'm going to leave it at that. I want to introduce you to Caleb now. Let him talk and tell you his story. And actually, he's on the front lines of trying to overcome this terrible, deplorable victim crime. So without any further delay, Caleb Altmeyer, here you go. Caleb, really a pleasure to at least meet you on Zoom. We've been speaking now for several months, and you know, it's been great conversations that we're having. And obviously, you're into something that I'm very interested in. I think most people are certainly upset by it, I would say, to say the least. And what you're doing is amazing. It really is. And, you know, the fact that you've taken such an interest in helping these people, and we're going to get into what that is in a moment, really should be commended. We need more people out there like you. So obviously, we did the intro. It's concerning human trafficking. And let me ask you this: what motivated you to get involved in this issue?
Yeah, a short answer to that is my babysitter was trafficked.
Mm,
And that's kind of what got us into learning about it, trying to figure out how to help people that are coming out of the life. My father ran a homeless shelter, and then my mother's a quadriplegic. So I grew up in an incredibly unique situation, loving Christian family. And that's kind of the direction my life was headed until I totally walked away from the Lord. But when I came back to God, I felt he called me into ministry. But I got to be honest with you, I never in a million years would have thought that I would be getting into anti-trafficking work. I thought trafficking was something that happened overseas or it involved kidnapping in containers. I would have never in a million years thought this would have been something God would have had for me in my future. But everything changed when a lady came into my dad's church service and told him her story. And that lady happened to be my babysitter. And she had been trafficked from the age of 6. And at that time, I was running a youth center And I went back to my staff and kind of told them her story and what she had told me. And it turns out that one of my coworkers had also been trafficked by her father, who worked at a prison and would sell her to his prison guard buddies. And so my dad is kind of like John Wayne. We joke, we have the Altmeyers are kind of a little notorious here in town in Spokane for ministry. There's five families. I know you're familiar with that, five
Yes.
families. My dad is the oldest. And so that was, we kind of, when she came and talked to him, he's really the one whose heart broke originally. And he retired from the mission and came in and started doing this, wanted to do this work with me. But what happened was, because my dad is kind of that John Wayne character, and works out, rides a Harley. Every time he would come to see me at my office, my coworker would run and hide in the back room. And I never could understand why she would run and hide in the back room from some guy that is super loving, a person, until I told the story of my babysitter. And then she opened up about her trafficking story. And that's when she said, "Your dad reminds me of some of the guys that will work at the prison, because he works out and he is a tough guy." And I remember after about a month of him coming in, she realized he was safe. And it took her about 25 minutes to walk 10 yards to give him a hug. She was trembling in so much fear. And that's when it shifted for me, after the babysitter and then seeing my coworker terrified to give my dad a hug because she had never had a loving father or somebody that cared about her, other than, her dad would manipulate and sell her. That's what changed it for me.
Caleb, let me ask you this. I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about exactly how people are trafficked. In a lot of ways, I think sometimes people think it's only women. They don't think that it's men or young boys or young children that could be trafficked. Why don't you explain really what the human trafficking situation, how terrible it really is, and how it affects so many groups of people, whether they be male, female, young, old, whatever. I think people need to understand that.
Yeah, so human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. But I think, Michael, people oftentimes confuse human smuggling with human trafficking. And so 3% of human trafficking cases are actually involve kidnapping. But that's what we think of because of, like, we watch Sound of Freedom, we watch the movie Taken. And so that's what we naturally think human trafficking is. But sex trafficking really is using force, fraud, or coercion to cause somebody to perform a commercial sex act. And if they're a minor, if you cause a minor to perform a commercial sex act, it's immediately trafficking. But if you're over 18, and about 75% of cases are over women over 18, it's force, fraud, or coercion. And so sex trafficking, I think, for somebody with your or my background, I think it'd be better identified as human exploitation, or sexual exploitation. And so smuggling is about transportation, and trafficking is about exploitation. And oftentimes, like down at the border, smuggling will turn into trafficking, but they're two totally different things. They often coincide, but you can be trafficked in your own city by your own parents in your own house. And it's horrible, man. And that's what's happening is, it's force, fraud, or coercion. So if somebody forces you to perform a commercial sex act, maybe that's forcing you to work at a strip club, forcing you to have OnlyFans, forcing you to perform pornography, that would be sex trafficking. If they're tricking you or coercing you or trying to make you think that they love you, really just to get in a relationship with you so that they can exploit you, that's sex trafficking. And then coercion, if somebody is threatening you, if you don't do XYZ, you're not going to see your kids. I'm not going to feed you. That would be sex trafficking. So there has to be force, fraud, or coercion, and it's any commercial sex act. And it doesn't necessarily have to be across a border.
Well, let me ask you this, and I appreciate that description. I'm learning something now also. When you say 3% are kidnapping victims, where does that occur mostly? Would it be occurring at the border? Could it occur anywhere in a parking lot or anywhere that people could be gathering? Or Because I always tell my daughters and I tell my wife, when you're in a parking lot, make sure you park your car around other people. Don't be, secluded in any area. Watch your surroundings all the time. Because I've heard stories where, women were kidnapped actually right in the parking lot, forced to get in somebody's car, and that's the last you saw of them.
Yeah, I have a friend that was one of the Miss Teen. I think she was Miss Washington, and she was almost kidnapped at a Target down in Phoenix.
Mm.
You have to be careful, and it can happen anywhere. To answer that question, we see certain stories like that at the border, obviously, where they're coming over and being smuggled. I can get into a little bit more of that with you. I know that was something that you were curious about, but it can happen anywhere, Michael. And I think that was one of the reasons why I was excited to talk to you. Other than the fact that the first time I heard your story, you were in your socks in your living room talking to PBD and just super bold about your faith. I loved it. But the fact that you got out of the life, but you weren't naive, right? We have a lot of women that come out of this life and it's terrifying for them, and they need to be kind of smart as they're coming out of that. And so you're right. You need to be able to train your kids and train your spouse and your wife on just being smart, not being naive.
Well, my friends, Michael Franzese here, and I am very excited to introduce to you all our non-alcoholic wine. Really excited and proud about this because I'll tell you why. Our process is a little bit different. This is real wine. It's not grape juice. It goes through the normal process of fermentation and everything else that wine goes through. An amazing process, by the way. I love sitting down and listening to these sommeliers that are really knowledgeable about the process of winemaking. It's amazing. So we get a bottle of wine, and then in the end, we boil the wine and remove the alcohol. So the taste of the wine is still there. Tried it myself many times. We have both a semi-sweet and a dry wine, and it's really terrific. And I think all of those of you that don't want to drink wine, but want to hold that glass and enjoy something that tastes just as good, maybe even better to some of you, this is it. Non-alcoholic wine, Franzese brand, one of a kind, first online, and then you'll be able to get it in markets throughout the country. This is really an offer that you shouldn't refuse, and I think this is going to be so appealing to all those of you out there who want the real taste of wine and want the enjoyment of having a glass of wine with your family, but not getting maybe some of the side effects that alcohol will do for you sometimes. So pick it up, non-alcoholic wine, Franzese brand. Again, I always give you an offer that you shouldn't refuse. Let me ask you this. Is there any particular group that would be more prominently involved in the kidnapping? I know one thing, back in the day, organized crime, mafia, Cosa Nostra, we would never even think of being involved in anything like that. Um, you know, but there are criminal groups that possibly could be engaging in that. Is there any group in particular that you're aware of?
Yeah, it's not something that I could totally say like online to everybody. You could maybe talk off camera, but there's certainly gangs that are actively engaging in it for sure.
And are they normally gangs from foreign countries that have, established themselves here in America?
There's some of that, but again, a lot of this is local. So that's the thing that shocks everybody. So for us up in our area in the Pacific Northwest, I'm not getting a ton of people from the border. Do we run into that? Yeah. But most of the women that we help, they grew up in our cities. They grew up in our homes. They were told that, from a young age, the only thing that they're good for is what they can give a man sexually. And I think culture is just screaming that at my generation. So as soon as you hit like junior high to a young guy, you're told the only thing that you're good for is basically your body count. Like that's how you're going to become popular is your body count. And then they try and get you addicted to pornography. So you start looking at women as objects at a very young age. And then for young girls, as soon as you get junior high, it's like culture's screaming at you. The most important thing about you is what you can give a man sexually. And so that's what we're seeing as young kids and young women in our society growing up in our own cities that are getting forced and tricked and frauded into performing commercial sex acts.
And who's perpetrating that when they're told that body counts are important? And I know, what, there are a number of YouTube platforms now where women get on there and talk about their body count, and they talk about it with pride. So
Yeah.
that kind of, it corroborates exactly what you're saying, that they've been led to believe that this is important. This is what guys want, but it's really just the opposite. It's something that leads
Yeah.
them into, a human trafficking situation.
Yeah, and we've been, but just think about what we've done as a country. So in the 60s, we took prayer and Bible out of school. And then right after that, we legalized abortion and pornography. And when you look through the Bible, which I know you're a believer, and you look through the book of Kings, uh, God judged societies on whether or not they tore down the high places. So if you look through the book of Kings, you'll see this king did what was right in the eyes of the Lord because he tore down the high places. Then this king didn't do what was right in the eyes of the Lord because he didn't tear down the high places. Well, those high places were where they would go to have orgies and they would sacrifice kids. So you were worshiping sex and blood. And if you look at America today, we tore down prayer and Bible in school and teaching kids. And instead, this is what we legalize and we worship. I mean, you can't go into the mall without having a ton of sexual things thrown at you. You can't be a young guy like when I was growing up. I mean, everything was trying to get you to get addicted to pornography. These kids have cell phones. And so, yeah, man, as a society, I think we now that's what we worship. We worship sex. And then what groomers do is they try to desensitize you to sex and then isolate you. Well, look at our culture. Everything about our culture is about sexuality, and we worship sexuality. Look at the Olympics. Like everything is about sexuality, and it's desensitizing us. It's desensitized my generation. It's desensitizing the generation behind them. And then they begin to isolate you. And now look what's happening with the government. I mean, they're isolating you from being able to, they want to kind of have more rights than you as a parent and try to isolate your kids. And that's what's worrying me. And that's why I believe we're seeing so much human trafficking is my generation literally is lost to this. We've literally been told and almost groomed in a way, especially young guys, to look at women as objects, and unfortunately, women to be look at themselves as objects. And when you have women that are going on podcast shows and they're excited and almost glorifying the fact that they're an object, it's confusing to young people that are growing up.
Yeah, I see that, and I think what a lot of people don't understand, which we're experiencing in this country, maybe around the world, although I don't think so. I think it's prevalent here in the freer countries, the democratic countries, as you would say, is that, immorality at some point leads to the downfall of a nation. It's one of the contributing factors. It happened in the Roman Empire, it happened in the Greek Empire, it's happening here in the United States. We're being weakened in every possible way. Our economy is in trouble, our military has been weakened, and immorality now is perverse throughout the nation. And it's terrible what's going on. And I agree with you. I mean, when we see the opening ceremony of the Olympics where they're applauding and celebrating, the mockery of Jesus in the Last Supper, and whether you're Christian or not, it doesn't matter. Just to do that to any single faith at all is just perverted, and it's disgraceful. But let me ask you this too. You said that it happens oftentimes in the home where parents are actually looking at their children and getting them prepared to human traffic or sexual traffic, I should say. Do you see much of that?
Unfortunately, yeah, we are seeing that. And I talked to, some of the school counselors and stuff. And, sometimes their parents aren't safe. And that's the sad part is the first two women that I ever talked to that have been trafficked, both of them were trafficked by their parents. And uniquely enough, Michael, both of these kids, they grew up in Satanism. Their parents were into witchcraft. And so it was part of the rituals that they would sell their kids, and I mean, thank God for the blood of Jesus. I know that you did a blood oath. I'm curious to know, even with you processing that, how powerful is the blood of Christ to you? Because you took a blood oath. Some of these kids are forced to take blood oaths, and some of these women, yeah, we see some of that sometimes. Sometimes we see people actually coming out of satanic ritual abuse, and that's how they end up in our program. It's taboo to talk about. People don't want to share about it, but it's a real thing.
So I hate to even use the word because it just grosses me out, but it's almost like parents and people that sex traffic other human beings, they're just pimps in a different way. I mean, I used to remember back in New York, before Mayor Giuliani took over and cleaned up the city, and he actually did. I mean, he tried to put me away for 100 years, but he did a great job as mayor, and we become friends right now, believe it or not. That's how God works. But my point is, we had prostitutes. Caleb, you would not believe it. You go downtown Manhattan, like to Canal Street or the Bowery, you stop your car at a light, and you would literally have 30, 40, 50 women come up to your car trying to get you to have sex with them, obviously for a price. So it seems like this is a little bit more sophisticated. Um, you know,
It's it's not. So this is good for you to understand, because you understand it. A pimp and a trafficker, they're oftentimes synonymous. And so a pimp is oftentimes the street terminology. Trafficker would be the legal terminology. So if a pimp is using force, fraud, or coercion, that's sex trafficking. So when you think about it and you look at all the prostituted women that you saw, how many of them were forced to do that? How many of them were tricked or manipulated into doing it? And how many of them were threatened to do it?
yeah, and I believe many of them back then. I mean, I never really had a conversation with any of them, but I think a lot of them were because, I was on the street at that point. You hear things, and, there was actually sex clubs, I would say, a lot of gay clubs. Believe it or not, there was guys that were being pimped out to other guys. It was pretty prominent and prevalent back in the 70s in New York, downtown Manhattan. But man, to think that kind of explains it to me. Parents being Satanists would give up their children like that. I would have thought initially it would be more for financial reasons, but it's more
Well,
of,
I mean, typically it is. So not everybody's a Satanist, but I'm just saying there is situations like that. But when you're dealing with drug addiction, and your daughter did such an amazing, brave thing by coming on and telling that story of Alec and the fentanyl. So you understand, or just how potent fentanyl is. And we're dealing with a massive fentanyl epidemic. And some of these parents will just sell their kids for drugs.
where's it coming from in your area? And you're up in Pacific Northwest. Where's it coming from? The
Yeah,
fentanyl.
it's just coming. It's coming from all over the place. I mean, I can't even begin to explain to you how crazy it is when we come that go downtown and you just see everybody on fentanyl. Man, we've had women almost die in our outside of our office. Like my whole staff has to be trained on Narcan
Oh gosh.
because it's just so bad. I mean, I'm talking administrative staff, not even the anti-trafficking staff. Almost every woman that comes to us, they're all coming off of drugs. They're all coming. There's a detox process of what we do to try and help stabilize these women. But it's insane what people will do for drugs, and including selling their own kids. It's so sad.
Caleb, let me ask you this because you deal with so many of these women mostly. What do you think the root cause is of them getting into drugs and fentanyl like that? And again, I had drugs in my family with my sister, my brother. I kind of understand it, but it's the numbers are increasing dramatically. And what do you think the root cause of that is with the women that you've experienced?
Well, for me, I mean, there's so many different reasons why people get into drugs. Oftentimes for the women we work with, they're given drugs, right? So it's really kind of interesting. So if you're being abused, I'll use that word. If you're being abused 10 times a day,
Mm,
oftentimes you're going to do drugs just so you can get through that amount of trauma, right? So they get addicted to drugs to just be able to get through the day, or they're given drugs so that they can be more compliant, and the traffickers and pimps can control them easier.
wow. It's so disheartening to me when I hear this. As a fellow Christian, a brother in Christ, I can tell you this. I know that it's coming over the southern border. I mean, they just had the biggest fentanyl bust ever. I think you've heard about that. Could have killed the population of the whole country. It was like
Yeah.
a ton or a half a ton, which is 1,000 pounds of fentanyl, and it came in over the border. And as a brother in Christ, I can tell you this: I have to hold back my feelings of almost hatred for the
Mm.
current administration not to close the border down for that reason alone. When we know a hundred
Yeah.
thousand, mostly young people, a year are dying either of opioid overdoses or fentanyl poisoning in some cases, because you don't even have to be addicted to have fentanyl laced in one of the drugs that you're taking, and it's poisonous. As my daughter described to her boyfriend Alec.
Yeah. I mean, man, where we're from, most of us know somebody that we deeply love is dead from overdose.
Yeah.
I've got multiple friends that have died from drug overdose and a lot of the fentanyl, and it's sad. And I was interested in this topic, so I actually flew down to the border. And also, when you do what I do, that's always like one of the main questions that somebody's going to ask you is because in their mind they're thinking trafficking, human smuggling, right? So immediately they're thinking, well, this must only happen at the border. So that's inevitably a question. Well, what's going down at the border? So I actually flew down to around the Houston area and met with an organization called Elijah Rising. They do similar to what we do, but in Houston, Texas, and there's about 500. They told us massage parlors, and they're just being ran through that. And it was so sad to me. They showed me, Michael. They showed me pictures of trees where people will be smuggled across the border, and as part of the smuggling, they're taken to these trees, and these trees have handcuffs, and they handcuff them or abuse them. And then they'll throw their lingerie and their clothes up in these trees. And there's literally pictures of abuse trees. And that's part of the smuggling stuff. I talked to some people, and we're kind of connected with different individuals that might come through our program or different entities that we work with that I kind of have to keep a little bit to myself. But in talking with some people that are very connected, it's sad to see just what's going on at the border. I've been told, the entry points are so bad that Border Patrol doesn't even know what's going on at the border because there's so many people coming through, and they get these sponsors. And I asked them these questions because I'd heard about the rumor, and they literally said, no, there's no way for us to vet who these sponsors are. So somebody can come through, say that there's a sponsor on the other side, and those people just disappear. They don't know, they can't vet who these sponsors are. It's a travesty. And some of the people that I've talked to, Michael, some of these guys, not even Christian, when we're communicating or new to their faith, they're saying, Caleb, I think there's already incels in the country. It's the only hope that we honestly have is Jesus and revival. I mean, that's heavy because they're all trying to, figure out from a government standpoint how to secure the border. But even they're saying, even if we secure the border, even if we get a new administration, they're very concerned still. And they're going, we need an awakening in our country.
No, I know that. And just to add on to that, I spoke to 850 Border Patrol agents from the state of Texas who told me, number one, that they're not even getting 10% of the illegal drugs that are coming across the border. They get really no help from the feds with respect to this. And they said human trafficking is running rampant. They can't control it. And they said the same thing. There could be terrorist cells in this country. There are terrorist cells in this country that they were unable to vet. And with close to 1 million or maybe more than 1 million gotaways, people that have gotten into this country, they have no idea where they are, who they are, where they came from. There's some serious things that could be happening here. We know that. But let me ask you this: human trafficking. Do you think that that the major reason for human trafficking is to sex traffic the people that they apprehend or that they get into their fold?
Yeah. So, under human trafficking, let's just say that's the parent company for a second. Under human trafficking, you're going to have organ trafficking, sex trafficking, and then labor trafficking,
When you said
right?
organ trafficking?
Organ trafficking. Yeah. You can look it up. They will actually sell organs and stuff. Yeah. So, but you have labor trafficking and sex trafficking are going to be the main ones. And so, some people are coming into the country so that they can be trafficked for their labor. But most what we see and what I deal with specifically is going to be sex trafficking.
Well, let me ask you this. I have to stop you for a minute. When you say organ trafficking, are they actually doing surgery on these people to get their organs and then sell them?
Yeah. That's my understanding of what I've heard, and they actually are taking people and they'll use their organs. Yeah, it's really interesting. I haven't dove fully into it, but obviously, with what we do with human trafficking, we've heard of those stories. So, yeah,
And let me ask you
there's
this.
a black market for everything. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's crazy about it is sex trafficking thrives because there's a demand for it, and we've got to stop the demand. You understand that with,
Yeah.
with every your past and ways that people would make money. There's the demand, and that's why trafficking exists. If there was no demand, it would go away.
Well, I think with organ trafficking, I mean, that could affect anyone, men, women, children, adults, doesn't matter. And I'm certain that if they are doing that, and I'm sure that they are now, that people are going to die as a result. You can't do surgery on everybody and take their organs and expect them to live. That's number one. Number two, the labor trafficking, that could be anybody. It could be a child, could be
Mhm.
a man, a woman. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, they can use
Yep.
anybody for that. And then sex trafficking, do you believe it's mostly women? I'm sure it would be.
Yeah. So, from the statistics that I've seen, yeah, most of these are women and girls. Yeah, without a doubt. There's definitely boys that are involved, but most of them are going to be women and girls.
So, Caleb, tell me exactly what you're doing now with your organization to help this and help these women, mostly, I would assume, just get out of it. What's the process? What do you do? How do you find them? How do they come to you? And how do you rehabilitate them? I guess that would be the word to use.
Yeah, that's a great word to use. So there's a lot of questions in there. I think those are all phenomenal. A lot of the ways that these women find us is through some of the networks we're part of. So we're part of 3 national networks, and so oftentimes we will get women from other cities that they've been rescued, and so they're looking for rehabilitation or recovery services. So oftentimes we get them through that. We get them through hospitals, detox centers in our area. So any place that will be working with somebody that could potentially be coming in for drug addiction or because oftentimes they get addicted to drugs, and so that's oftentimes the way that they can escape is maybe going through a hospital or something like that. So a lot of networking is mostly how we find these people, and then obviously just word of mouth as time goes on. One of the things we do is we do have outreach hubs. So we work with an organization called Rescue America, and we have people that come in and actually will call escort services and leave them a phone number if they need to get out, and they'll figure out a way to kind of get out of their situation and then contact Rescue America, and then Rescue America will send them to organizations like ours. And so, when we started, we didn't know what we were doing, Michael. I mean, when we started this, I was running an organization to help kids, and we were running like youth centers and stuff like that. And um, it was just a strange situation to have that babysitter come and then have a coworker come. And then all of a sudden we're like, well, let's just open up a house. And so we just opened up a home and we thought, well, we'll just put some host parents in there. And if a girl needs a place to live, then we'll give her a free place to stay. And we thought we'd help 2 or 3 women. And we had 21 women go through our house in 9 months. And then we were sitting there going, well, this isn't working. We need professional care. We need staff that are rotating. We can't just hire families or throw women in host homes. They're not ready for the amount of trauma that these women are dealing with. And so that made us go and pursue other organizations, which there wasn't a ton back in 2016, 15 area of time. And we met with about 7 organizations. Most of them we went to learn, and instead we would pray for them because they were so depleted and stressed out. But eventually found this one organization that was doing a long-term program, which means that women would come to them once they got sober, and they would go through 9 months of recovery and 9 months of transitional housing and have a job afterward. And at the time they were turning away 60 women a year because there was no long-term programs. And so we started a long-term program. um, After that safe house, we realized we need to get more trained in this, learn what we're doing, eventually raised the money, started a long-term care program, had women flying in from all over the United States going through our long-term care. And then something shifted in the last year and a half. We started getting a lot more local women contacting us. And so and one of the things is a lot of the women, when they're coming out of the life, right, they're not sober yet. They're not clean. And so we needed to kind of shift our priorities. And so we transitioned to now offering a 30 to 90-day recovery program. And we actually help them get healing and help them get stable and get them ready to go into long-term care programs. And then as we grow the organization, we would love to reopen a long-term care and transitional housing. But right now, that was the biggest need we were seeing as we talked to some of our networks, was there were so few immediate stabilization care facilities. And so that's what we do. So the women actually will come to us. We have a whole intake process, pregnancy test, drug testing. We actually have to wand their things in themselves for trackers. All their stuff goes into Faraday bags. Then they end up going through a kind of a process where we talk to them, let them know what they're going into, have them sign some paperwork. Then they go to our undisclosed location. They get free food, new clothing. They're taken care of. They're helped through their detox process. If it's at the extreme detox, then we will take them to a hospital with an advocate, and our staff will sit there with them. There's a lot that goes into it. And then after that, they go through classes. They go through individual counseling and trauma therapy. We have counselors on staff, and trying to help them just get to the point of stabilization so that they can think about their future. And then at no cost to them, we get them into long-term programs that we're partnered with. Because of our past of doing long-term care, we're connected with a lot of amazing long-term care organizations. And that's been really good, because now the long-term care organizations know if helping captives contacts us with somebody, they are clean, they are ready to go into a program, where before, half the women that we would get through our long-term care program, they weren't ready for long-term care. They were still coming off of heroin. There was just no bridge between trafficking and long-term care. And so that's what we currently do.
So you're actually full service for these mostly women, I would say, and
100%.
you're a private organization, nonprofit.
Yes, sir.
I have two questions. Number one, have you seen the government really, doing work in this area? Have you had any government assistance? Are they behind these programs? Do they offer you anything, for the service that you're performing?
Not for us, because we're a religious organization. We believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And because we believe that, we are unable to get some funding. Our state, obviously, in Washington State, is a little bit more left leaning. If you go to Shared Hope, Shared Hope is an amazing organization. They actually grade different states. So I know you in California, you have a C grade for the different laws and how they prosecute. Washington actually has an A. So in some ways, the government's doing a decent job. However, with what we do with recovery services, I'll give you an example. We were actually voted in a few months ago to go into our city hall and apply for $1 million grant. And they actually voted for our organization to go in, because we just purchased our local strip club and are turning that into our headquarters. And that money would have helped us buy the building immediately. And we were voted to go and present, and they sent us the request for proposal. And on the request for proposal, there was 5 things that you had to do to qualify. We hit every single one of them. We're the only one in our whole entire area that really provides the amount of rooms that we have in full service care. We just do it in the name of Jesus. And so on the back side of the paper, all of a sudden it says there's 3 terms. If we get money from the government, the first term was we needed to do exactly what the agreement was, which is fair. It's a grant, right? Understandable. The second term was if we asked for any money for a building, they would put a 15-year restriction on our deed, which is a little scary to have the government telling you what to do in your building for 15 years. But the third part said if we took any money, it had to be used for secular use only. And so I went in and talked to them and I said, hey, can you change the wording to say if applying for program funds, it must be used for secular use only, because I don't want your money for programs. I don't want you to tell me how to run the program. You know, I've got my thoughts on that. You know what I mean? Like, my understanding is when you guys figure out how to fix a road or a pothole, then maybe you can come tell us how to fix somebody's life. And, that's a little tongue in cheek, but you kind of get where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I
And
get
so
it.
I'm going, we just want this one-time money to buy this building. to sh- uh, to open up a recovery center for traffic victims. We'll fund the entire remodel and we'll fund the entire program. You'll never see me again. But they were not able to do that. And so what it came down to, and I clarified, I said, so what you're telling me is if I take this money, then I can only use this building. If I take this money for the building, I can only use this building for secular use only. And they said yes. So on the night that I was supposed to go in to present for the $1 million, I had to go turn down the $1 million opportunity and pull our RFP because there's just no amount of money that we would ever take Christ out of our programming.
Caleb, that angers me. I'll give you a similar response from the government. The recidivism rate, you may know this or may not, in federal prison for inmates that, do their time, come out, the recidivism rate for them returning to prison is about 65 to 70%. That's a real number. And they found when Christian discipleship programs come into the institution and they disciple men inside and then disciple them again outside, the recidivism rate drops to 5%. From
Wow.
65 to 70 down to 5%. And you know that the prison will not back those organizations, won't do it. And it's almost criminal when you think about it, where you're actually benefiting society, you're benefiting constituents in the communities that Congress people work in, and they won't support these programs, and it's unbelievable. And I
Well,
applaud.
and
Yeah, of
oftentimes the ladies we work with, they're looking for a religious organization,
course.
especially if they're coming out of situations like we had talked about in the past. How do you fight satanic ritual abuse without the blood of Jesus? It's not
Exactly.
possible.
My brother-in-law for the last 20 years has had a home for men and women, and it's Christ-based, and he's had tremendous success. And he can't get any government backing at all. It's all private individuals that support him, and Christians, obviously. Let me ask you this: do you know of any other organizations, non-Christian organizations, that are doing what you're doing? The reason I ask for that is, Christians, we get a bad rap a lot. But I don't see any organizations doing as much as we do, not only for communities within the country, but outside of our country. Our church gives millions of dollars, to overseas organizations and missions and so on and so forth. They do the same here within their own community, and we don't get credit for it, and they're looking always, Christians are trying to, to knock us all the time and, put on displays like that degrading display they did at the Olympics. It's just terrible. It really is. They don't get it. They really don't get it.
Yeah. No, to be honest with you, I'll just be straight. When we first got into this, it's mostly Christians that get into this industry. So most of the organizations that we work with now, some of them are in different states that they can it's a little easier for them to work with their government and do some things. Some in Texas, they've been able to work out some things. We were just in Alabama meeting with an organization. They've been able to work some stuff out. But almost everybody that I work with is faith-based or was faith-based and then gave up their faith-based element because for funding. Almost, but most of the people that dove into this head on to fight it were faith-based or were started like that. There's one in our state that was funded and started by a church, and now they have nothing to do with faith at all because of the government funding. So it's interesting, man. But Christ tells us to set captives free. This is what he was about. It's interesting for Jesus. He grew up in Nazareth, and the whole time he knows he's going to be who he is, and he's the Son of God, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes and gets tested, grabs his disciples, and where does he go? He goes straight back home. I'm going to go tell my people who I am. And of all the scriptures in the world to open up to, he opens up to Isaiah 61 and he reads it. And it says, the Spirit of the Lord's anointed me to preach good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, and what? Set captives free. This is what Jesus is about. This is what Christianity is about. And so I think that's why so many of us that are in this world come out of faith. And it is sad to me that We still get taxed. Don't get it wrong. We still have to pay payroll taxes. A lot of times people will say, well, you're a nonprofit. Well, that means that we're federally tax exempt. But that doesn't mean that we still don't have to pay sales tax, that we still don't have to pay payroll tax. They know how to get money from everybody, right?
Right.
But we're not able to get any of that funding unless we decide to, you know, um, to pull Christ out of it. And some organizations will figure it out where they'll have a non-faith element to what they do, a secular side, and so that will be funded as long as it's separate. For us, that's nearly impossible. We are 100% just a religious organization, and everything we do has a religious element to it. We don't force religion on anybody. I mean, when somebody comes to our program or comes in for services, that would be crazy to be like, are you a Christian? Oh, you're not. You don't get help. That's crazy. We help everybody. 80% of the people that come into our services identify as LGBT. So it's not that we don't love and we don't care about people that think differently than us. It's just, this is why we exist. We exist because of our faith, and we don't want to be able to not have that element to what we do.
Yeah, that's a great point. People should really understand that. And then we can wrap this up. Um, just because we don't agree with your lifestyle and because we don't make it our lifestyle, it doesn't mean we hate you. It doesn't mean that we don't want to help you. It doesn't mean we don't want to love you. It's not up for us to judge that. God, Jesus is the final judge. So, the fact that you're helping everybody, and most of the people that do come through initially are not Christian, and you're still, your arms are open to them. And that's most Christians organizations the same exact way. And people need to understand that. So I really applaud you for what you're doing. What's the name of your organization?
Helping captives.
Helping captives, and I'm going to do all I can to support you. Hopefully, through this, video that we're doing here now, this interview, people will see you, and I'm going to support you in every way that I can, and encourage people to do the same. And let's just continue to build on what you're doing, and the fact that it's Christ based, people should applaud that, because things that are Christ based normally work. If people get Jesus into their hearts, there's a transformation that happens from the inside out. And everything that you do to promote that, to promote their accepting Christ, even just by doing what you're doing, you don't have to be preachy, you don't have to hit people over the head, but just them knowing that you're a God-loving organization means a lot to people. And I've seen that over the past 20 years. So listen, I appreciate everything you're doing, Caleb, and we're going to, put everything we can up about your organization and links to be in touch with you. And, hopefully God will do the rest, as he always does.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. We appreciate it. Like I said, we're trying right now to take our local club that used to make money off of basically objectifying women and now turn that into a place that's going to heal and help exploited women. And we're now, because we turned down that money, we are now asking the public and to help us raise the money so that we can own the building and remodel it and turn that in. So I really appreciate that, and couldn't ask for any more. I honor you. I think you're an amazing guy. You've got boldness. You're not afraid to share your faith. And I just think it's incredible, the platform God's given you. And would just anything that you would like prayer for, or, I'm a little curious, to be honest with you, what your vision is for Michael Franzese, so we can be praying for you. But man, love you to death. I think the world of you. It's amazing, your story. Amazing platform God's given you. And I hope to just help be a brother in Christ to you and just help advance the kingdom of God together. And maybe we can put a dent in this anti-trafficking thing together.
Well, we're certainly going to support it. And thank you for all the kind words. And for me, the only prayer is don't let me mess up what God has given me, and, bless my family, and just allow me to do what I'm doing as long as God allows it. And that's it. But yeah, we're going to be very supportive of you. I appreciate everything you do. And you know what? God will find a way to put that building, in your hands. There's no question in my mind that he will. So we'll do our part to make that happen. Caleb, we're going to stay in touch. God bless you. Thank you for everything, and just continue to do that powerful work. God knows we need you here in this country.
All right, brother. Appreciate it.